Hello, my name is Matthew, and last night I watched Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve, and I thought I would talk about it. I was really looking forward to this movie. Steve Donahue, and I have been reading Dune by Frank Herbert, really enjoying it. And last year I read Dune by Frank Herbert in anticipation of the movie that, of course, got delayed. I was also looking forward to the movie because I'm a fan in general of the director. He's made a few movies that I've really liked. I think I've seen all of his movies. But the ending of Prisoners I thought was astounding. The character study in Enemy, the character portrayed by Jake Gyllenhaal, I thought was really well done. And there's a theme that runs throughout Denis Villeneuve's movies, his ability to create an atmospheric mood. And I thought it would work really well in a movie adaptation of Dune, which is set on this alien planet with a harsh environment. And being able to see this alien world and feel what it would be like to live there and to feel alien, to feel different. In some ways, it's done spectacularly. There are moments that are splendid, that have splendor. To see these huge panoramic landscapes, to see the spaceships, the starships, and the ships that they're called thopters, a helicopter kind of air transportation that look like dragonflies. Uh, it's done in a very distinct, unique, believable way. There's a lot of things that I liked about the movie, almost all of which um, come down to the visual elements. The story itself did not work for me very well. The book, at least at the beginning, feels like an ensemble cast. There's a large cast of characters that have complex, complicated relationships. It's a lot to take reading the novel, and there's a lot of work that would need to be done to have all of those elements situated in order to have a comprehensible movie. There's a royal house, the House Atreides, that are going on to a desert planet, displacing Baron Harkonnen and the Harkonnen royal house, um, enacted by the Emperor, who's actually jealous of Duke Leto and his son and the royal house for how powerful they've become, and it's a grand trap to ruin and dismantle House Atreides. The Harkonnens know this, and they don't want to leave these spice factories because they're making an incredible amount of wealth off of the spice and off of the backs of the indigenous people, the Fremen, the desert people that live on this planet. If you don't want to know anything about the movie, if you don't want to know anything about the book, this is a forewarning. I want to speak frankly and explicitly about things that happen in the movie and my impressions of them. So I don't really think there's anything in the movie to be spoiled at any moment that's going to ruin the experience, but there you go. Be forewarned. Um, Instead of being an ensemble cast, this large story with all of these characters, it does feel like Timothy Chalamet, who plays Paul Atreides, is the star, and then there's a supporting cast behind him. Um, the motivations um, didn't feel correct. The way that Paul Atreides, who is the son of a duke, part of royalty, he's been raised with a royal education and royal training. His mother is a Bene Gesserit who nearly has super powers and generations of knowledge from a cosmic nunnery. She has been training him as well, and they're leaving their home planet, which is a water planet, to go to a desert planet, and it's turning his whole life upside down, and it's dangerous. They all know that they're going into a trap, putting their lives and reputation and the whole royal house, which you get the feeling has been running strong for generations or centuries, could all come to an end. And instead, it almost feels like Paul's just moving to a different school. And a lot of the movie felt like a high school romance, at least in the background. There was a really interesting choice at the very beginning of the movie to have Shawnee, played by Zendaya, be the opening voice, the perspective in which this whole story is going to be told. And I thought that was really interesting, to change the whole perspective. And maybe, since the movie really is just the first book, which ends with a downfall, ends with a tragedy. There's no big retribution moment or vengeance or revenge or anything like that. It ends on a low point, not a high note. And at least in that way, to the director's credit, he really did make the first bit of the book, the first third. That perspective is dropped immediately. Instead, it just kind of gives enough sense for us to know that when Paul, who also has these prescient visions, when he's seeing this girl in his dreams, the viewer who hasn't necessarily seen or read the book knows that this is going to be the girl on the other planet. And instead of a story, at least even in setup, of a young man who loses everything, loses his father, the royal house, the other royal attendants, people that he knows and cares about, have all either died or gone missing, or have been subjected to join enemy forces, and to have a young strapling royal having all of his royalty and all of his powers stripped away and being deserted in the desert, with his mother who's with a child and left with nothing. And the story should be this retribution arc. And instead it feels like Paul's kind of happy that he met the girl. He sees the girl and goes, well, that's the girl of my dreams. I felt like it was tacky, and unsatisfying. Timothée Chalamet's performance didn't do very much for me. Some of it, I think, might have been outside of his control. His costume design, really, unfortunately, he looks just like Edward Scissorhands. It's not really a joke. Just when you're watching the movie, it's too identifiable. The hair, the kind of leather strapped still suits that they're wearing, unfortunate. And the motivations of his performance, he's totally unbelievable as any sort of physical force. There's these fight scenes throughout the movie that just don't really work at all for Timothée Chalamet's stature. There are critical moments in the book that do not show up in the movie, and that's not a fault of the movie if the movie can hold its own. There are moments in the book that are shown on the screen. There's a moment where Paul Atreides and his father, Duke Leto, and some of the other parts of the royal house go on an expedition to see the spice mining and how it operates. And it's a big, spectacular set piece. One of the worms comes, there is a malfunction that happens, and Duke Leto decides to save the men of the factory instead of saving either the spice or considering the whole thing to be a loss. And it's the first time that we get to see one of these worms, or at least almost like a monster movie, hints or pieces of the worm. And it was rushed and confusing. Visually, you don't see what's happening. They have to get the people out and then get them onto get the people out of the spice station and into these spaceships to get them out of danger. And we focus on Timothy Chalamet the whole time, and it's not visually shown that they even saved anybody. You're told that they are, but it should have been a much more extended sequence. And there are many moments where the action scenes or the set pieces feel rushed, and that really shouldn't be the case for a 2.5 hour long movie. I said at the very beginning that visually it was a splendor to watch, and it's just not. It is. It's just not believably done. This is supposed to be a desert planet that is not just a really hot desert, but formidable and deadly, hundreds and hundreds of degrees hot. You couldn't go outside. You would just start burning to a crisp. You couldn't be outside at all. They have these suits that they have to wear, and the inhospitable nature of this wasteland is supposed to show how hardened the indigenous people that live there are. And early on in the movie, when they get there are scenes when people are just walking outside in t-shirts and just sort of saying, well, it's hot out. There's no sweat. The hair is perfect. And you don't get a feeling that anyone's actually hot. I was thinking there are the desert scene in Spaceballs seems more inhospitable than any moment as far as that formidable, overbearing, inhospitable hellscape that they should be in. It does not come across on the screen. It just seems like they are on a beach. The character development of Paul Atreides, unfortunately, commands most of the attention of the movie. There are so many other interesting characters that kind of get sidelined. Lady Jessica, who is supposed to be this incredible, powerful presence. She's the Lady Jessica. When she walks into a room, everybody knows, everybody bows to her presence. And she's almost shown as like a damsel in distress, except for a few moments where all of a sudden she becomes overpowered. But her nature of being a force to reckon with is not shown very well in the movie. My favorite characters were probably the Baron Harkonnen, is grossly obese. He's the leader of the Harkonnen house, and the villain. He's the head of the mob rule royal house, and he's shown in a really interesting way, larger than life, villainous and deadly. The end of the movie, they've lost everything. The royal house is decimated. Paul's lost his father. He's lost all of these royal attendants around him. He has nothing except for his mother. They've been deserted in the in the desert planet. They've gone through this sandstorm. Uh, the local indigenous people are there. They know that they're there, but they're a dangerous presence. And instead of Paul acknowledging any of these things or thinking about what are they going to do, how is his mother doing, reflecting on the death of his father, there's like a crying scene. It's his emotional scene, and he's upset that he has all these powers, and he says to his mom, like, why am I such a freak? And there was no emotional impact, and that's the part where the strings are going. You can hear the violin and the piano. Didn't do anything, and did not work. There are elements that just at the beginning of the movie where Paul is supposed to put his hand in this torture box. It's a fantastic moment in the book. An incredible amount of pain, and if he takes his hand out, he'll die. And he's to believe that he's left his hand in this box to the point where it's been burnt to a cinder. And he pulls his hand out, and of course it's fine. In the movie, it's just Timothy Chalamet kind of wiggling his face around and told to be quiet. And he takes his hand out without any hesitation or reluctance to see a bloody stump. I'd like to say that other than that, the acting was really good, but the characters have very little personality, and a lot of the characters didn't have very much to do other than just getting the story to the next part. I also didn't like. There's often a complaint that Marvel movies are just always a setup for the next movie, and even though that's definitely true, they're entertaining. This movie was overly broody, moody, somber, melancholic, lifeless in a way. Not that it has to be have jokes or anything like that, but very little human moments. You don't get the feeling that Duke Leto loves his concubine. Duke Leto loves Jessica, or the family relationships, or the people outside of the family. You don't even get a sense really that the villains hate the main protagonists. Very little relationship work, and there's a lot missing from the story, from the emotional development, from the character development, that should not be missing in a 2.5 hour long movie that could have contained the entire novel. And it ends with, well, this is just the beginning, and it's going to be Paul walking off with the girl that he saw in his dreams. Ends in the same way the first Lord of the Rings, where they just sort of walk away. And it also doesn't feel tragic. They all seem like, okay, well, now this is what's happening. Now we've gotten blown up in a spacecraft. Now we've gone through this sandstorm. Now we're with the desert people. Now I was in a knife fight. Now I just killed somebody. No tension, no suspense, no feeling of danger. And the worms. So these worms are built up. They're supposed to be just hugely gigantic, monstrous, dangerous in a way that only a natural force can be. They get their reveal. Worm comes out, looks terrifying. And then towards the end of the movie, you see one of the people riding the worm. And again, it didn't do it for me. One, the worm looked significantly scaled down. And still kind of silly. Those are some of my thoughts of the movie. I didn't go over the whole the whole of the plot. I have other videos where I've done that in the book, but kind of underwhelming. Maybe it would be. Maybe I would like it better if it was just on mute in the background. Story wise, stretched out and rushed and unsatisfying and largely forgettable. Let me know if you've seen the movie. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you disagree. Anything like that. So please leave a comment, and thank you for watching, and take care.